Hey. Hey.
Users and devs.
Whoa. Hey.
Brought to you by ServerPress, Maker's Desktop Server. They make local WordPress development easy. Check them out at serverpress.com. And our friends over at Loft. Loft provides support for WordPress sites, including disaster preparedness, patches, maintenance, and plugin management, content updates, and more, all for a flat monthly fee. Right now, they're offering a free trial. Check them out at poweredbyloft.com. I'm Jason Tucker. Find me at Jason Tucker on Twitter.
Hey.
I'm Steve Zehngut. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive, and I run the OC WordPress Meetup.
I'm Sarah Media, all the things, just have the WordPress, yeah.
And I'm Jason Cosper, and I got friends in low places.
Ooh, you better say cheap hat.
Go hit us up over on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, and leave us a review. We would appreciate that. And join us over on our Discord. Go to WPwatercooler.com/Discord, where you can come hang out with Cosper and I and all the folks that are hanging out with us.
Me too. I'll be there eventually when I get my life together. I'm a show up.
So he has to figure out how to download an app.
Now that's not the problem, but you know, we'll get there.
So we're talking about security. Last episode on 388, we talked about security, but more in the form of
your mom.
It's like outside security sort of thing, and this stuff's more like inside security sort of thing, like dealing with the actual folks that already have access to your website. Steve wrote it on. Yeah, and Steve wrote about it on Twitter, saying that it's when the devs go rogue, which I think is actually a pretty good way of describing it. We've seen plenty of these, things where somebody goes and gets into their site and maybe they owe money. We've seen those types of things where they owe money and now they're in there messing with stuff. It's a mess, and so we're going to kind of discuss this a little bit.
Well, the classic example from several years ago was that San Francisco fitness website where they got into a money dispute, and the dev decided to put up his own page in place of their website. A nicely designed page that said they owe me money, and so I've taken down their website.
Did they sue? Whatever happened with that? Like I imagine they would sue him.
I don't remember. Was it Fitness SF? That seemed to ring a bell?
I don't know. That is some deep recollection of that. It's what is essentially a meme. So to me, somebody's life, but to me, it's a meme. So I don't know. But yeah, basically, right. That was the thing. They didn't get paid. So that's one of the main problems. And we were talking about an example of someone local to California that we know who did similar tactics. So it's not just, random urban legend that this happens. This is a real thing. This is why I tell all my clients, you need to have the keys to your own castle.
This happens more often than not, and more often than you think, right? And essentially the dispute kind of looks like this, right? No, it looks like this. I was starting to spell it out, but my hands were too low. What I educate all my clients about when we first start the relationship is that Zeek, we are a work for hire shop. So we are building a work product that the client owns. And the reason I said that is because that tends to be what's in dispute is there are developers that are of the belief that even though they're getting paid as a work for hire, they own the work product, or they have some sort of ownership stake in the work product that they're building.
I.e., it would not be stealing to take down someone's website or disruptive because they feel ownership of it.
And I'll tell you where there's a gray area, because there is a little bit.
If they haven't paid them yet, then is it work for hire?
Well, again, it depends on your contract, right? It really depends on what's in your contract. But there's a little bit of a gray area, and here's how we distinguish it, because there is intellectual property, IP that we use and reuse over and over on lots of different client sites that we've built and we've grown over time, right? But once we use it with the client site, it then becomes that site becomes an iteration of that intellectual property, and the iteration is actually what's owned by the by our clients, right? So that tends to be the crossover. So if a dev, if you as the client haven't made that distinction with the dev that you own this iteration, then the dev actually may have some belief that they own part of the work product, even if it was a work for hire.
Here's the twist, though, or the twisty question, I suppose, is what about if the dev is inside the house?
Yep.
Right.
Inside the house.
Inside the business.
I'm assuming what we're talking about is somebody who's inside the house and becomes disgruntled for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope that you don't have, like, there's a different type of protection you need from devs who are just, you know, not trying to hurt things, but do. That's a different show. But the same idea still applies with in-house devs, right? Even if I'm working in-house, what I'm building is owned by the company that is paying me to build it. It's owned by the entity that I'm working for. And that is I make that distinction, you know, on purpose, because a lot of devs don't understand that, and I think there's a sort of a belief system that, oh, I built this, it's mine. Even if I was paid to build it, it's mine, and that's not true. I mean, you know, technically, well, not technically, but anecdotally, on the flip side, I have come across a lot of clients or a lot of business owners in general, not necessarily my clients, who feel like they don't actually own their website. You know, they are so distanced from it that they feel like it is. We've kind of hit on this a couple times with the whole devs hosting their client site, and so really, who does own it at that point, right? Like,
so let's talk about the things you can own, right? So there are things you can own so that this doesn't happen to you. So even if somebody does become disgruntled, right, they don't have the ability to go rogue, right? or too rogue, right. And so I think the first thing, and we have talked about this many times, is your domain name, right? If you are running a website, you need to own and control your own domain name, right? So period,
end of sentence, end of story, end of statement. Just do it.
Yes. And if what I'm saying is a foreign concept to you, and you're listening to this podcast, you need to Google this. You need to understand what a registrar is, and you need to own this. So whether it's GoDaddy or Namecheap or Network Solutions, or there's a whole bunch of them, right? You need to have that account, and it needs to be that's an account that is yours, and you need to maintain control of it. Right. Now, what I like about what GoDaddy does is if you are working with GoDaddy, you can delegate access from your account to your dev so that they can make changes on your domain name, and then you can then revoke that access. So you're not giving away.
Engine has that too. They have a lot of dev access where you can give access to everything but billing, or you can give access to different components. So that, I mean, that's, you know,
and that's on the hosting side. So yes, the reason I bring this up is that delegate access, you want that built into all of the tools that you use. And the reason is do not give away your login and password for these things. Don't give away your credentials to your registrar. It's a bad idea.
I mean, I could see even taking, essentially pointing the name, pointing over the domain name to something like Cloudflare and giving them access to Cloudflare.
That's fine.
And then going from there. But yeah, the domain itself, there's so many things that could go wrong if they get in there and start messing with things.
And so I'd say in general, right, if you're working with an outside dev, or I don't know how this would happen inside, but if you're working with an outside dev or an agency that bought your domain name and runs your hosting, then you need to change that right now.
You're a dev and you own your client's domain name, I am judging you, and I think you are wrong.
And you should be judged. I'm with Say on this one.
Yeah, we're judging you, and we think that you're doing it wrong. Hashtag doing it wrong. And I honestly do not feel bad about saying that whatsoever.
I go even further and say if that's happening, if you're a dev and you own your client's domain name, that's being done with malicious intent.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were definitely
really difficult. It's really difficult to decouple that, because it's like, if you wanted to no longer use that developer essentially owns that domain name. They own the hosting for it. Like, all those things should be separated. I usually tell people, don't even make sure that your web host isn't the place that you buy your domain name from. Buy it someplace else, and then get the web hosting. Make sure all the things are separated out a little bit. That way you don't have to worry about, these sorts of things down the road.
But I want to talk a little bit more of it's coming from inside the house.
Yep.
Because it's one thing for the devs that you hire to go rogue. Well, the outside contractors that you hire to go rogue, right? But what we kind of touched on a little earlier, the devs that are, and I think this is what sparked this entire security conversation for us, is people who work for a company who cause problems. So the work for an agency, like if one of Zeke's people decided to use their access to copy databases or mess up databases or put things in there because they're leaving and they're mad at Steve for some reason. I don't know why anyone would ever be mad at Steve.
That would never happen.
Never happen. No one can get mad at Cancer sun signs. That's a thing.
Yeah, I remember when we were discussing this, the idea came to me was that the way that I approach things at work, being the IT director that I am, is like, I want to make sure that I can revoke access as quickly as possible. And I've worked in situations where, I get an email or a phone call or something from HR saying, hey, in 20 minutes, we're going to be escorting so-and-so out. I don't know what they're going to end up doing. As I go to their desk, I'm going to send you a text message, and I just need you to just start turning off stuff. And I'm like, okay, no problem. And I go in there and I turn off one thing, and then they're disconnected from the whole network. Their phone gets disconnected from the Wi-Fi. Their laptop, it no longer works.
Wow, the Wi-Fi.
No longer able to log in. What's that?
And you got their phone tethered to the Wi-Fi that way. That's pretty elaborate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We use Radius for that. And so you can just tell it, say username, password, you use your username and password. It's not a shared password. So anytime you can make it not be a shared password, the better. And with so GitHub, with any of those places.
We have a similar process to what Jason just said. I'm going to take it a step further. Speaking on the HR side, right? Anybody that you part ways with, right? You need to go through this process, right? You can't do it for one and not for the other, thinking, oh, you know what, this person's not gonna do anything bad or malicious, right? Because it's those people that actually are usually the ones that are the worst, right? So this policy goes for anybody that you're parting ways with, or firing, or terminating, or quit, or whatever. I don't care how amicable it is. Go through this process with everybody that leaves the company.
I would also say, if you're a dev and you're leaving a client, or if you're a freelancer or contractor or an agency, whatever, leaving a client, the same thing goes. Like, not just disconnect your client's connection, but I disconnect. I'm like, I don't want any of your stuff, which I already try to keep it all in their folders and on their stuff when they're giving me assets. But basically, it's like, all right, we're done. I'm literally deleting everything that I've ever had of yours, your last past connections, your assets, because I don't want that liability. I want my hard drive space back, but also I don't want the liability. And I also, I've never had this problem, but it's occurred to me a lot that a lot of times after you leave a company for whatever reason, even if it's just their website was done and they're just running their lives, when something breaks later, they're like, what broke? Assuming that like even if I haven't touched their site for like years, they're like, oh, you must have done something. I'm like, nope, not logging into your site, not responsible for your site. Like, it's your site. I don't have access to it.
I will say the last job that I quit, I told them that I was at a hosting company, and I told them I was going to work for another hosting company, and I wanted to put in my notice, and they said, that's okay. We don't want you taking anything to the next hosting company. And I said, that's fair. I'm not going to, but that's fair. And the minute I got out of that meeting, my company issued laptop stopped working. And every bit of information that I had pertaining to the company, they basically used what was built into Mac OS and iCloud at the time, and nuked my laptop from orbit. And I was a little annoyed by that, but at the same time, I was like, I absolutely get why they did it. Waited for the box to show up and shipped it back. And then I was like, I'm done with this job. I have nothing else connecting me to this job. And like I said, I was a little annoyed at the time because I'm like, man, I think I had one or two things that I had like personally grabbed on there that I wish that I had saved. But honestly, you shouldn't do that on your company machine.
And for that reason, right? Because anything that is all that work stuff, like I work so hard and it's such a pain, but like I work so hard to keep those boundaries between, at least for my employees, to keep it separate. Like, you know, here's the work stuff. Do not email me from your personal, do not whatever. Like it's in the Slack, it's on the email servers, it's in our Google Drive. Like I don't want any shared documents from anyone else's Google whatever email accounts. It's done.
So we also have a disengagement process when we part ways with a client, right? And we let the client know, hey, we've disengaged. We don't have any of your access anymore. We've destroyed. We've taken this all out of our 1Password, and our tools are now disconnected from your site, right? And so for the same reason as say, we don't want the liability, right? But we also want to let them know. I mean, it's part of our process because, you know, like Cosper said, we are kind of wiping our hands. And if they want to re-engage at some point, no problem. We have a re-engagement process as well. We're not saying, you know, goodbye forever. We're just saying, you know, we're not liable for anything that happens after we've parted ways.
Right. I think that can be really confusing for people in general. And I think that, and I know for a fact, for me, less so now because I really try to implement really strong practices, you know, just in general. I've learned so much over the years. But when I first started, you know, I had a lot of those accesses that were just kind of there, you know what I mean? And I didn't know so much to disconnect and they didn't disconnect me. And so I could have gone in and, you know, access people's, you know, servers and done whatever I wanted to do. I did not because that's not my vibe. But like, you know, I could have, and just it's scary in terms of liability, but also scary in terms of like just people just leaving their doors open and they don't even know that the door is open. Like that's really, are there any, I had asked y'all as a group about, you know, some forms of security obfuscation, but are there any programs that you know of that check for like access, like that manage access like that? What do you guys use to manage those? Is it just Google single sign-on, or I mean, I know there are programs, but what do you use is my question.
Yeah, for me, it's single sign-on, but it's tied to. I mean, we're a Microsoft shop as well, so we have all Microsoft products. We don't use my previous shop that I worked at. It was all Apple stuff, so I could pull off the types of things that Cosper was talking about. But yeah, it's like when you have someone who's that rogue employee that's working for you. You want to be able, you essentially need to treat everyone as the rogue employee or potential rogue employee. And if you do that, then you can quickly and easily just kind of just go, all right, I'm yanking this out of here, I'm taking this thing away. And the less buttons I could do it in, the faster I can get it done. So yeah, there is that.
A simple thing you can do, you know, this isn't foolproof, but you can add an activity log monitor inside of WordPress. It does add some extra load on your server and on your database, but at least you can see sort of who's doing what within your WordPress site, right? If you know, let's say somebody still has access to your WordPress site and they decided to modify a post or a page,
just log in, even
delete a bunch of posts, just log in. That's right. And so there are activity logging plugins that are you just install them and turn them on, and it looks at everything. So anything that you do inside of WordPress is being logged to that activity log. Again,
Stream is one of those called Stream.
There's a bunch of them, but that's a good practice because, like Say said, you might want to just see if somebody's still accessing your website, right? And so, you know, I think it's important to talk about, you know, what might happen if your employee or a contractor goes rogue. Like what can they do to your site or your server or your business?
Well, I think they go rogue before you know it, because then they really, you know, before you cut off their access, how do you track that?
Yeah.
Good. Cosper?
Ooh, yeah. No, I was going to say, I think I sent something from Reddit to our group. I posted it in the chat already if Jason wants to pull that up. It was from r/legal advice. And it said, this employee was hired as a web developer and SEO digital marketing person. He was always pushing blame on others, not following directions, and overall just being a subpar employee. Thus, he was fired. We joked we should change all the passwords and info from him to keep him from messing things up, but he figured he wouldn't be able to do anything if he were no longer in our office. We were wrong. The employee secretly kept personal records of all of our clients and wreaked all this havoc from home. Half our clients' sites are completely wiped, some are half ruined, while others remain untouched because we made it just in time to stop him. And they're like, what is my legal repercussions on this? When you're too late when you're writing a post to Reddit about the legal repercussions.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
It's a cautionary tale is what it turns into.
And again, I mean, and sure, they can pursue legal action, but I mean, the damage is done, and there's no way you're going to be able to recoup the damage that's been done. But so,
databases, backups.
And to me, that's the extreme, right? The extreme is they wipe your site, they delete the database, they delete, all of your files, they delete the code. Right, you delete
they
the backup.
don't want to hurt you if they've been there. Is the problem?
Yeah, so they go in and they delete everything on the site. Yeah. And if you don't have a remote backup or a local backup, you are hosed.
So my approach from the security.
What's that?
My approach from the security point of view is I only give people access that they need, and then it's annoying, but they have to keep asking you for access. So I give them the minimum amount that they need to do it. So for instance, do they necessarily need the SQL Server login in order to be able to get into the production SQL Server? Probably not. If you're using like a build process or something like that, that thing's going to take care of all of that. Do they need access to the developer one? Sure. Here's the development one. Here's all the stuff to be able to do it. Here, we'll give you that. So I give them just enough, but not too much. And then as they need more, I slowly but surely give them more. For instance, do they need an FTP access to any of the servers if they're using a build process? No, they don't need any of that. All they need is to be able to have access to that system that's going to do the building and pushing the code up. And so when you do that, you can now remove some of those, some of those pieces from them being able to go and make a quick change to the site and then push it to production and then blow the whole thing out of the water. So if you pretend that they don't need everything, you're not going to have to deal with much of this because you're only giving them enough string to, slowly but surely.
But you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
And so,
but if you were hiring me, you're hiring me because I know what I'm doing. Just like if they hire you, same way.
But if you're a small shop and you're running your own WordPress site, right, and you hire a developer to come work on this, or you have somebody in-house working on this, and you have to part ways, then you could be hosed. There's a couple types of plugins that I strip out of every site that we inherit, right? So, one of them is any sort of database backup plugin that's accessible within the WordPress dashboard. Right. So I don't like database backups that are there and the ability to make a backup and download a backup. They're right there in the dashboard.
What about a plugin called Bulk Edit where you can bulk delete all of the content out of the thing? Because I have a client, we're changing it, but I'm like, why is this even installed in the first place?
And one of the other plugins that I strip out and I have found a lot lately is WP File Manager, or those types of plugins where you actually have access to the code through the WordPress dashboard, right? WordPress used to have a theme editor as part of the basic dashboard. Is it still there?
It's still there.
It's
still there, but you have to approve. Yeah.
Right. And so it used to be enabled by default, but anywhere within the dashboard that you can edit the code, I strip those out because those things are just security concerns, right? And maybe those things, somebody might not be doing something maliciously, right? They may just go in and screw up the website because they don't know what they're doing. And those plugins allow you to really screw up the website.
Yeah.
Right.
really screwed up. Anything that writes to the database. I wanted to mention real quick. So I just read this really interesting story that I posted here in Wired about this mental health company in Finland. And so it's not just that. The moral of the story here is basically that it's not just about the website, right? Because you also have to think about what is your client's like data. So this company in Finland was a mental health company, and they were logging all of their patient records into their server. So like taking all these notes, right? But long story, you can read the article. There's a lot of variance around it. But basically the security folks that they hired to do it erased the initial ransom notice. And now all of these therapy records have been breached, and they are all available online. And so it's like devastating a good portion of Finland because, you know, basically all of their mental health records, which is, you know, a big deal, is now available online. So it's like, and of course it's had huge catastrophic company issues, and the company's dissolving and all that. But the key thing is you might be like, oh, the website's okay, but what about what about the actual content, the actual data of what your client does? Like, it's easy to forget about that stuff when you're a dev because that's just the data that's moving through, but that could be valuable to someone. And, you know, whether that's an in-house person, like it seems like it might've been an in-house person in this particular hack, but, you know,
one of our rules, and again, we change this on sites that we inherit, is don't store sensitive information on your web server. It's just a rule of ours. You can't get hacked if it's not there, right? And we literally will inherit sites with personal data, right? That completely violates GDPR. We've inherited sites with credit card data in them. I'm not kidding.
How do you even keep that in there anymore?
I had one where the guy backed up his entire computer to the server, and no joke, there were tax records sitting in there. There was all sorts of fun stuff. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to put my gloves on here, and I'm going to grab this little stick, and I'm going to move a few of those items, and then I'm going to say, client, you need to fix this. I don't know what you got going on in here, but like, you know, that your web host is not the place to store this crap.
We've inherited sites with passwords and API keys just sitting in a text file on the, like, in the root of the server. I wish
I didn't keep that something there in the first place.
I wish I was kidding about this stuff.
You mean I shouldn't be doing that?
So
I've got to go change some things.
A lot of times I'll see people writing JavaScript, and they'll just put the API key right in the JavaScript. So if you just look at the source, there's their API keys, right? And so, you know, these are just, you know, there's a lot of best practices things that you just need to follow, or you have security holes.
All of this gives me such anxiety. Like, it's like, I feel like building websites in 10 years ago, let alone 20 years ago, was such a different experience. And the idea that it's just easy to build a website, and you can build a WordPress website that's so easy or whatever, when nowadays there's so much more to it than just building a website. And I think that's really a problem that gets, even with all of these access things with in-house people and whatever, but just the idea that even everybody should be able to do this, it doesn't educate anyone on the idea that of security, of protecting your data. Like, everyone's so obsessed with the front end of the website that no one's even really thinking about all of this information in the back end. And like, they're like, oh, well, I'm not using password as my password, so that's secure, right? It's done.
This is why auditing is important.
Absolutely. Now, when going back to that Reddit post, you're not always just dealing with a disgruntled employee. Sometimes you're dealing with a gruntled employee who is perfectly fine with things and just screws up. We all make mistakes, and
not anybody on this call.
No, I make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. I mean, yeah, right. I'm tethered from my phone right now because I couldn't manage to get my internet running before the show started. Like, I tried, but network traffic. However, even with that, like, I hammer this home again and again on this show, and have, if you're going to take a backup, I know your host keeps backups, any good web host keeps backups, but keep your own backup, because there's a lie I live by, which is 1 is none and 2 is 1. So if you have a backup that fails, you'll have a backup of the backup. And I don't mean to get like all X to the Z exhibit here with this, but put a backup in your backup, so then you have a backup.
And do not store your backups on your production server.
No.
Or, by the way, something I've learned recently with your managed WordPress host, because if, for example, your credit card gets hacked or something and you have to cancel it and then suddenly the billing doesn't come through, there are a few web hosts that are like, oh, sorry, you haven't paid us in 2 weeks. We're taking down everything, including your backups. And then you're like, oh, shoot, I didn't realize that was happening. I think I have to build a whole entire new website for my client. I mean, for instance. It's just
I'm going through that. I'm going through that right now. We had a fraud event on our corporate card, and I've had to change it on all the sites that do the automatic billing. And SendGrid just shut us down because I didn't get the emails. Like, they just go into junk. So I went in and literally, not only did they shut us down, they deleted all my data.
And you can send an email because you're using SendGrid. So there you go.
I'm so glad that maybe happened to my friend's website.
Yeah. One more thing I want to get in on this show is, if you're using SendGrid, switch to Mailgun right now.
Because he's mad.
Because they suck.
No personal vendettas here. It's all the
Yeah.
Sponsored by
SendGrid. Is SendGrid a sponsor? Oh shit.
No, not
No,
that.
And they won't be. They won't be anytime soon.
No.
All right, folks. Well, that's it for today. I want to say thank you very much for coming and hanging out with us. I do want to let you know that next week we're going to be doing a dev branch, and we'll be talking about dev type things as we usually do.
This is the branch.
We'll see how that goes. Talk to y'all later. Have a good one.
Bye.
Hey.
Subscribe to us on our different places where you can download a podcast. We're all over the place. Just so you know, we're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and as well as YouTube. So if you're listening to this, go and subscribe us. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, guys.